Hello ladies and gentlemen. If you are new here on this channel, kindly subscribe the channel. Bible translator breaks in tears. They lied to us for 2,000 years. A seasoned Bible translator, known for his deep devotion and decades of linguistic expertise, has made a shocking revelation that is shaking the religious world. In a moment of raw emotion, he broke down in tears, claiming that critical mistranslations have misled believers for 2 millennia. Dr. Samuel Wright, a scholar fluent in ancient Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, has spent over 30 years translating sacred texts. While working on a new critical edition of the Bible, he stumbled upon discrepancies that he says change everything we thought we knew about Christianity. In a video that has since gone viral, Wright can be seen with trembling hands, his eyes brimming with tears. They lied to us, he says, his voice breaking. For 2,000 years, we have been reading distorted words, believing altered meanings. The truth has been buried under layers of mistranslation, manipulation, and selective editing. What did he find? Dr. Wright points to several key passages that he says have been altered or misinterpreted, leading to widespread misconceptions about Christian doctrine. Among the most shocking, the nature of Jesus. Wright claims that early manuscripts describe Jesus in ways that differ significantly from modern theology. The concept of hell the original texts never described. Hell as a place of eternal torment. He insists it was a metaphor twisted over centuries to instill fear. The role of women. Wright asserts that certain passages used to justify the subjugation of women were deliberately altered by medieval scribes. This isn't about faith, Wright clarifies. It's about truth. If we truly believe in God, we must seek the real message, not just what we've been handed down blindly. The backlash. Wright's revelation has ignited fierce debate. While some scholars have applauded his courage, others accuse him of sensationalism and heresy. Religious authorities have been quick to downplay his claims, insisting that translations have remained faithful to the original meaning. But for many, his tearful confession has planted a seed of doubt. If what he's saying is true, we need to rethink everything, said one viewer of his video. As the world awaits further evidence, one thing is clear: Dr. Wright's discovery has opened a Pandora's box that can no longer be ignored. Mistranslations have distorted Christian teachings. Throughout history, the translation of the Bible has played a crucial role in shaping Christian beliefs. However, Dr. Samuel Wright argues that many key passages have been mistranslated, leading to significant distortions in how Christianity is understood and practiced today. These mistranslations, whether accidental or intentional, have altered fundamental doctrines and influenced millions of believers for centuries.
One of the most notable areas of distortion is the depiction of Jesus' identity and mission. Dr. Wright claims that early manuscripts present Jesus more as a teacher of divine wisdom rather than the figure of absolute divinity that later translations emphasize. The shift from the original meaning of certain Greek and Hebrew words has reinforced a rigid theological framework that may not align with what Jesus himself intended. Another major mistranslation involves the concept of hell and eternal punishment. According to Dr. Wright, words like Sheol Hebrew and Hades Greek originally referred to a shadowy underworld or a temporary state of the dead, rather than a fiery place of eternal suffering. The introduction of the Latin word inferno in later translations, along with medieval interpretations, reinforced the idea of hell as a place of unending torment. This, he argues, was a deliberate shift meant to instill fear and strengthen religious control over people's behavior. Additionally, the role of women in Christianity has been deeply affected by mistranslations. Dr. Wright highlights how certain passages that were originally more inclusive have been altered to reflect patriarchal biases. For example, Romans 16:7 mentions a woman named Eunia, who was described as outstanding among the apostles. However, later translations altered her name to Junius, a masculine form, effectively erasing evidence of female apostleship. This, along with other modifications, has contributed to the long-standing exclusion of women from leadership roles in many Christian traditions. Dr. Wright also points to the translation of key moral teachings as an area of concern. He asserts that some words related to love, justice, and sin have been translated in ways that emphasize punishment over mercy, legalism over compassion, and institutional control over individual faith. As a result, entire theological frameworks have been built on mistranslations that diverge from the Bible's original messages. In light of these findings, Dr. Wright calls for a deeper examination of biblical texts, urging believers to seek a more authentic understanding of Christianity based on the oldest and most accurate translations available. Religious fear and control. Dr. Samuel Wright argues that mistranslations and selective interpretations of the Bible have been used for centuries to instill fear and maintain religious control over believers. He believes that certain theological concepts, especially those concerning hell, sin, and obedience, were shaped not just by faith, but by a desire to establish authority and compliance within religious institutions. One of the most powerful tools of control has been the concept of hell and eternal punishment. Dr. Wright claims that the original biblical texts did not depict hell as a place of unending torment, but rather as a metaphor for separation from God or a temporary state of purification. Words like Sheol Hebrew and Hades Greek originally referred to the realm of the dead, not a place of fiery punishment. However, later translations, influenced by political and religious motives, introduced Inferno Latin and exaggerated the imagery of eternal suffering. This change made hell an effective tool for enforcing moral behavior and obedience, as believers were taught to fear eternal damnation if they strayed from church teachings. Another significant area of religious control is the emphasis on blind obedience to authority. Dr. Wright points out that certain biblical passages were selectively translated or emphasized to support the power of religious leaders. For example, verses like Romans 13:1, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities," have been used to discourage questioning of church leadership and political rulers who aligned with religious institutions. By promoting obedience as a divine command, religious authorities could maintain influence over large populations, suppress dissent, and discourage independent interpretation of Scripture. Additionally, Dr. Wright highlights how guilt and shame have been weaponized through misinterpretations of sin. Many original biblical texts describe sin as an action that distances individuals from God, yet later teachings emphasized sin as an inherent corruption that requires strict religious intervention. By portraying believers as deeply flawed and in constant need of church guidance, institutions were able to create dependence on religious leaders for salvation, confession, and absolution. This control over personal morality ensured that individuals remained loyal to the church, fearing divine punishment if they did not comply. Dr. Wright urges believers to critically examine these historical distortions. He emphasizes that true faith should be built on love, wisdom, and truth, not fear. He calls for a return to the original teachings of the Bible, free from the manipulations that have been used to control people for centuries. A call for truth and re-examination. Dr. Samuel Wright's emotional revelation is not just a critique of mistranslations, but a passionate call for believers to seek the true, unaltered message of the Bible. He urges Christians to move beyond blind acceptance of traditional interpretations and instead critically examine the original texts and historical contexts in which they were written. For too long, he argues, religious institutions have dictated doctrine without allowing open discussion or questioning of biblical accuracy. Now, he believes, is the time for re-examination. Another crucial aspect of his call for re-examination is understanding the historical and political influences that shaped Christianity. He argues that many theological doctrines were developed not through divine revelation, but through church councils, power struggles, and cultural shifts. The Council of Nicaea 325 AD, for example, played a major role in defining the nature of Christ. Yet many believers are unaware that debates and political influences shaped these decisions. By studying history, believers can gain a clearer perspective on how Christianity evolved and what may have been altered or omitted along the way. Ultimately, Dr. Wright's message is not one of destruction but of renewal. He does not call for abandoning faith but for strengthening it through knowledge and understanding. He believes that a re-examination of Scripture will lead to a more authentic relationship with God, one based on truth, love, and wisdom rather than fear and blind obedience. He urges Christians to embark on this journey with open minds, courage, and a deep commitment to seeking the real message of Jesus. The suppression of alternative Christian teachings. Dr. Samuel Wright argues that one of the greatest tragedies in Christian history is the deliberate suppression of alternative teachings that could have given believers a fuller, more nuanced understanding of Jesus' message. Over the centuries, powerful religious institutions selectively determined which texts and interpretations were acceptable, effectively silencing voices that presented different theological perspectives. This suppression, he claims, has led to a narrow and sometimes misleading version of Christianity. One of the most significant examples of this suppression is the exclusion of certain early Christian texts from the biblical canon. In the first few centuries after Jesus' death, many different Christian communities existed, each with their own writings, beliefs, and interpretations. Texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of Judas contain teachings that differ from what is found in the four canonical Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These writings suggest a more mystical, personal understanding of faith rather than one that relies on institutional authority. However, these Gospels were labeled as heretical and eventually banned by the early church. Now, a choice stands before believers. Will they dismiss his claims as heresy, clinging to the comfort of tradition? Or will they take the courageous step toward uncovering the unfiltered truth of Jesus' teachings? History has shown that truth, no matter how long it is buried, always resurfaces. Dr. Wright's words may be unsettling, but they ignite a movement, one that calls for a faith built not on blind obedience, but on knowledge, wisdom, and a deep, personal connection with God. The question is no longer whether these revelations will change Christianity. The question is, are we ready to listen?